In Formula One, liveries are the only creative expression a team can have, and when they get it right, it makes for some of the most iconic cars we've seen in F1 history. But you know what's better than that? When they get it terribly wrong. I've made two videos highlighting the best liveries, but you guys made it clear that the worst need some attention brought to them as well. With this being the only opportunity teams have to make something that's purely aesthetic and they fail, it's one of the funniest and sometimes just flat out sad things to see on the F1 grid. So today, I'm going to go through some of F1's worst liveries. In a time where F1 is probably the most controversial, I'm here to give you a break from all the headache of content surrounding McLaren, Lando Norris, and Oscar Piastri, and instead, we're just going to kick back and look at some silly little designs. The way this is going to work is I'm going to pick a livery for each F1 team currently and their lineage of ownership, so Renault counts as Alpine and so on. Also, there's so many more from teams no longer putting about, so I will include some of those at the end too. The truth is though, all of these are purely opinionated, so if you disagree and think I missed a livery or two, let me know which ones in the comments. First up comes Red Bull, and picking a bad livery for them is actually really difficult because they don't really change up their livery too much, and their baseline is so good that there aren't really any standouts that are ridiculously worse than the rest. As you go through the eras of their cars, you really have to dive deeper and look at some of those one-off liveries. We've seen some incredible ones like the white Red Bulls and the 2023 Vegas car, but there are some that aren't quite great either. Looking at some specifically, you can look at things like the 2007 Wings for Life livery, which at first glance doesn't look incredible, but the closer you look at it, you'll realize it's covered in pictures of people who donated to the Wings for Life charity. For that reason, I think I'd get put on a list of some sort if I were to say the charity car is the worst, so I'll keep moving. The one that actually comes to mind is one I've mentioned before, and that's the 2023 Miami livery. This livery reminds me of specifically two things: a bowling alley carpet and a Dixie cup. And although those have very memorable designs, it's not necessarily for the reason that they look good. I think if they fully committed and just changed the normal car's colors, like swapping up the red and yellow in the car for blue and pink, it could look a lot better. But as it was, I just can't get on board with it. Next up comes Mercedes, and they kind of have the same thing going on with Red Bull, that they keep a similar livery every year. Mercedes has never gone for anything outlandish, with one-off liveries being more of an occasional thing, and when they do have them, they're not really a big change. And the only time they really shifted design was when they went from silver to black cars in 2021, 2020, and 2023. With that being said, although the shift was big, it didn't make the cars look bad in any way, and although I generally like the silver cars more, I think the Mercedes has dropped the ball a bit on silver liveries in more recent years, specifically 2022 here. Looking at the 2022 car, it's by no means a bad looking car, just the worst of a great bunch. The Zero side pod design really doesn't do any favors, and I can't describe why, but the head-on view just looks weird. I'll also point out that the red coloring on the engine cover for the Ineos sponsorship stands out a lot more in this design than in other years, and it does make it look worse in my opinion. I also have to give an honorable mention to the Singapore 2024 car, where they made the Petronas blue the main color of the car. And as much as I think it's a great color for the team, it definitely plays more of an accent role, and in my mind, doesn't go great as a main color. After that comes McLaren, who are widely regarded for having some of the best liveries to ever grace the track. But with highs, also comes lows. The first livery that comes to mind is the 2015 McLaren, where they started the season in a chrome car and abandoned it for a black primary later in the season. It wasn't necessarily bad looking, but it just didn't scream McLaren in the way the chrome did in the past. Another livery that had the same effect of not really representing McLaren well was the 2017 Challenger, which was the first year going back to orange. The orange wasn't the papaya we know today, and for that reason, it once again doesn't look like a McLaren car and reminds me more of the orange Arrows cars. At least one good thing about these liveries is that they came in a time where McLaren performed the worst, so at least if they were stinking it up, they did it at the back of the grid. Also, another bad McLaren in my eyes was the 2022 car, but not the actual one they used, the one they revealed at first. The initial look was quite the eyesore, and I get the point was to match the other disciplines McLaren had with Extreme E, Formula E, and IndyCar, but it's definitely a good thing that they switch it up from the Fanta car. Next comes Ferrari, and for the same reason I struggled to pick a best livery for the Scuderia, I'm having a tough time choosing the worst. The truth is, Ferrari doesn't make many changes in their liveries, with the Rosso Corsa Red being the forefront, and some minor changes are made each year. And a lot of the design goods or bads are left down to the sponsors. The truth is, some sponsors like Santander or Shell work very well with the car and its color palette, while others don't. Some standouts to me are the 2021 Ferrari with the bright lime green Mission Winnow sponsor on the engine cover, which was actually just Marlboro cigarettes with a bit of a loophole. But green was definitely a choice. It definitely stands out, but not in the way that you would want. Another instance is this year's Challenger, specifically the one in Miami, where they just kind of gave the reins to HP, and although I can see the vision, I just don't love it. It's pretty much the same as 2024 also, where they just make great race suits and then mediocre liveries to match. I think if you decide to go for such out there race suits and fully commit to the color scheme there, you really just gotta go full Dynaco Lightning McQueen on them. Aston Martin is a much more recent addition to F1, with their current ownership entering in the Racing Point saga in 2018, and there isn't much bad there. They've only ever had one-off livery, if you can even call it that, with such minor changes, and there truly hasn't been a bad year of Aston Martin liveries. That only leaves two options left, and that's the two Racing Point liveries in 2019 and 2020. They both had that pretty in pink focus, which was definitely cool at first in my mind, but it lost its novelty very quickly. Out of the two, the 2020 car at least had a bit more cohesiveness, with the BWT logo coming down as a diagonal stripe, but the 2019 car didn't have that to offer. They had extra dark blue for the Sport Peso sponsorship, which in my mind kinda just wrecked the car. Overall, the pink isn't too bad, but I just definitely prefer the Aston Martin green. Next comes Alpine, which also includes Renault, but we don't need to go all that far back to reach what I think is the worst. You just heard my opinion on the pink cars, but you know what's worse than a pink Racing Point? A pink and blue Alpine. I find these new Alpine cars to be so chaotic with the bright blue and pink at the same time, and the worst instance to me is this year's car. When they brought in the pink in 2022, at least they tried to ease it in, and they kept it similar in 2023. And then in 2024, they went with the carbon, which actually looked really nice in my opinion. But they went all out on the Candyland colors in 2025. Honestly, at least they aren't shown on the broadcast too much for both the reasons that they're backmarkers and the fact that the F1 broadcast cares more about the driver's girlfriends anyways, so it saves us from the eyesore that is the car. After that comes the combination of Racing Bull's AlphaTauri and Toro Rosso, which have had some great liveries over the years, which makes it really tough to pick a worst. The Toro Rosso liveries started out as basically a Red Bull 2.0 car, but in a good way, and the current Racing Bull system is good as well, as I think both the 2024 livery and the current White Bull look very nice. A one-off to mention though is the denim car used in the Singapore GP last year, also known as the Jormula 1 car. But even though a jean car sounds bad, it actually doesn't look too bad in execution, so that just leaves AlphaTauri. For being a fashion brand, AlphaTauri isn't exactly the best in the aesthetics department. My issue doesn't come with either the 2022 or 23 cars, as I think the design actually fits the shape of the car pretty well. But out of 2020 and 2021, I have to say they're both equally as bad in my opinion. I just think it's quite the design choice to have the white be the color that transitions into the carbon floor, considering you have navy as the other color. I actually found this render of AlphaTauri from 2021 with the two colors swapped, and it looks infinitely better than the actual car, and it leaves a lot to be desired with the actual thing. Next for Haas is quite the difficult choice. They don't really have any standout good or bad liveries for their annual ones, and out of their one-offs in recent years, none of them have been bad. One thing I will say though is the early Haas liveries do look a bit rough when going back to them, and the one that I'm specifically looking at is the livery they used in the first half of the 2017 season. When I imagine a Formula 1 car and the design it has, you expect something flashy and flamboyant, and if not, you expect something sleek and elegant, and this car achieves neither of those. I can't be the only one to think that going for a dark gray car is just a bit boring. Like, at least silver has some shine, or white stands out, but dark gray? Really? I mean, it would look good on a good old Volkswagen Jetta or something, but an F1 car? I don't know. The best way I can describe this thing is that it looks like it would go better to fit a shoe than a car. Now we have a team that's been in the sport for a much longer time with Sauber and under multiple regimes. So, as much of those different days of BMW or Alfa Romeo have looked good, there are also some bad ones. For starters, the 2016 Sauber using blue and yellow just looks odd and bland. For those of you who played the F1 video game, this looks like it was designed in the livery editor for My Team Career mode, and even more bland than that is 2012. There really isn't much for me to say about this being bad because it doesn't have anything on it. It's just a plain car. Finally, another one that I find to not be as bad as the other two, but more of a wasted potential situation is this year's car. With 2 years of being kick Sauber, the lime green and black is such a good color combo, and in 2024 it looked decent. But in 2025 they just colored half the car and called it a day, when there's such an opportunity to be had. Now for the final current team, we have Williams. They're flooded with good liveries over the years, specifically in the years they were doing well, so it's just a mere coincidence that they had their bad liveries when they were backmarkers. And I'm specifically looking at 2019 and 2021. The 2019 car employed a gradient for their livery, and just like I said with Haas about being flashy, a gradient isn't the right thing for a car like this. Maybe if you're looking at a gradient of two blues, it's something, but white to light blue is just bad. Also, the 2021 car is going to be a bit more controversial, as I know this one is liked by some people, but I just hate it. If you're going to go for this stripe design, at least have the lines going in the same way the car is traveling, so in images, you can pretend this thing was fast. Anyways, it's a good thing they got these liveries out of the way in their worst years. Well, that's a wrap on the current teams, but I also want to detail some bad liveries we've had over the years from teams no longer kicking about. Two of the worst liveries in my opinion are ones that I went over in another video, so I'm not going to go too into detail here, but they're the Earth Honda and the Conjoined Twins BAR. The Earth Honda had good intentions, trying to bring attention to environmental awareness, but the execution on making the livery look good just didn't work as well as it could have in my opinion, and it didn't look as cool as the idea sounded. As for the BAR, what isn't going wrong here? It's two alright liveries combined into one as a compromise for not being able to run two different liveries on two different cars, and shocker, it isn't cohesive whatsoever. The Hesketh 308D is another one that you look at and just ask why. This is the result of allowing a sponsor to have too much space on a Formula 1 car, and there's no way in hell this would even be allowed in modern F1. The same thing follows for the Shadow DN9, with having a lion on the front of the car and its mouth being an opening for the number, which just makes it look goofy. The vibe as it is just doesn't belong in Formula 1, and I think it would be much more fitting in something like Monster Jam. Another one I have is the 1999 Arrows, which if I just show you the front of it, it looks really good. But then I reveal the rest of the car, and you realize they ran out of paint halfway through. Genuinely, if they fully went for the Repsol livery, this could have been one of the greats, but the story behind it is even funnier. The reason for this back half of the car being blank and having the T- sponsorship is a 25% buyout of the team by Nigerian prince Malik Ado Ibrahim, and the area on the car could be purchased by a company for advertisement, but through the entire season, it never brought in a single penny. Next is the Footwork FA15, and this car was just flat out odd. The digital print was definitely quite the design choice, and it looks like they just slapped it on wherever they saw fit, which I guess hats off to them for creating a Roblox car years before Roblox existed. Anyways, there are probably many more bad liveries across the years, so let me know which ones you think I missed in the comments.